This story is a work of fiction. Lanius flies silently. Chapter 1. Sunday, April 11th, 2021, 11 a.m. Honam Diner, Sihongdong, Kumcheon District, Seoul. Inside the back room of the Honam Diner, the rich smell of toasted sesame oil for the lunch service was spreading lightly. It should have been a peaceful Sunday morning. However, the air inside the half-open sliding door was filled with a mood completely opposite to that pleasant smell. It was full of tension and worry. It was dangerous, like a tight string ready to snap at the slightest touch. The cause was the broadcast playing on the modern LCD TV, which sat on an old wooden cabinet. It was a dark, heavy documentary summarizing the changes in reality brought by the reign of death that hit the whole world on February 19th. The TV screen was filled with the deep, black darkness of endless space. In the middle of it, the blue earth holding plenty of sunlight quietly filled the scene. That blue light looked beautiful and peaceful, just like the wonder humanity felt when they first went into space and looked back at their home. The camera slowly moved to the opposite side of the sun. As it moved to the dark side of the earth covered in deep night, a chilling, strange feeling covered the screen. It was very different from the active planet we used to know. The yellow lights of civilization, which should have shined brightly across the continents like veins, were broken in countless places. Huge areas were marked like scars. In these places, the lights were heavily reduced, barely breathing, or completely gone into the dark black void. A heavy and grand cello melody played quietly in the background. The deep, serious voice of the documentary narrator broke the silence. Friday, February 19, 2021. The 3,000 unknown scarabs that poured down from the sky brought a huge change. They completely destroyed the world that humanity had taken for granted. The scarabs that dropped from low orbit had the terrible power of bunker-buster bombs. They ruthlessly destroyed the heritage of humanity on Earth. On the TV screen, pieces of the ruined civilization passed by in slow motion. Historic buildings, which boasted hundreds of years of history and represented the political achievements of the world, were destroyed by the fierce explosions of the Black Needles. In their place, only ugly craters remained. Major government buildings and military bases, which were the backbone of nations, also became deep craters. Major airports where countless people and goods passed through, naval ports representing control of the seas, and Air Force bases guarding the skies all changed into terrible craters. The main production factories that made the blood and flesh of modern civilization, as well as the main communication centers, underwater fiber optic cable hubs, and data centers that supported the hyper-connected age, all became burned black craters. Even major cultural sites, which proved humanity's beauty and history, were blown to pieces by the Black Needles striking at the cruel speed of Mach 20. According to the numbers, 40 million people died without a trace, and 10% of the world's population had to bleed from direct injuries caused by the overwhelming violence of this black rain. However, looking deeper into the loss of human resources, humanity actually suffered much more deadly and serious damage. Politicians, soldiers, government workers, financial workers, researchers, and engineers around the world. The people needed to decide and run national policies, and the highly educated people with master's degrees or higher. Half of these people died on the exact same day, at the exact same time. This was a disaster big enough to instantly destroy the systems, technology, and science that humanity had worked so hard to build. High-tech industrial facilities also could not escape the cruel drop of the scarabs. Oil refineries, energy plants, chemical plants, metal refineries, shipyards, heavy industry factories, and precision manufacturing plants. All the facilities supporting the production industry turned to ashes. As a result, in just one day, the total production of the whole Earth dropped pointlessly by 45%. The background cello music changed into a dark and urgent beat. The screen changed, showing the red words live in the corner. With a voice full of deep despair, the documentary narrator spoke. But the more hopeless thing is this. Even if you do not see a scarab right in front of you, somewhere on a strange land on Earth, even at this hour, scarabs are constantly appearing. They shoot out blue plasma and destroy human civilization. The screen slowly changed again. Under a gray sky where thick dust blew like a snowstorm, an unknown scholar wearing old glasses sat hopelessly in the ruins of a huge broken library. He blankly held the ashes of burned papers and books in his hands. He watched endlessly as the wisdom of humanity slipped through his fingers. The scholar cried out in pain. He said the development of human civilization had been pushed back hundreds of years in just the single day the black rain fell. The screen changed to show the tightly closed doors of a conference hall at the Hotel Bayerischer Hof in Munich, Germany. Then, a world map appeared. Slowly, the map was divided by a huge invisible wall into two colors, blue and red. The documentary narrator spoke in a deep, sad voice. On February 22, 2021, representatives of countries from all over the world gathered at the Hotel Bayerischer Hof. They desperately wanted to unite into one organization to respond to the never-before-seen crisis of the scarabs. However, this attempt, which had never once succeeded in human history, sadly ended in a painful failure again. On this day, the Munich Treaty was signed. A supranational group called MUTO, Munich Unified Treaty Organization, was created. The countries that joined the Munich Treaty chose to fight the scarabs through a perfect combining of technology and military power, centered around the overwhelming technology of the United States. Using this combined power, the scarabs that landed on the ground were all successfully destroyed by silver plasma lances. However, the freedom they gained from the scarabs was never free. To protect their freedom, the joining countries got the duty to fight together for all other countries. At the same time, they had to accept a heavy bill, sharing massive economic costs. The screen showed the areas painted blue on the Earth. A blinding video played, showing American B-2 bombers flying high in the sky and dropping silver plasma lances. The music changed to an even heavier and darker minor key, and the screen showed a huge continent painted red. In the gray ruins where a snowstorm raged, the traces of a terrible battle that forced bloody sacrifices passed by in slow motion. On the other hand, the countries that did not join the Munich Treaty created a group called the Human Sovereignty Alliance, or HSA for short. They preserved the differences in their national technologies, fully claimed their military sovereignty against other countries' interference, and refused to be integrated by the United States. However, sadly, only a miserable tragedy waited for those who chose to protect their military sovereignty. This was especially true regarding the bloody sacrifice of innocent citizens. The screen suddenly went dark. Over the terrible ruins of the Asian continent, a black and white interview video of an expert was shown. With a pale face, he tried hard to hide his shaking voice and said, "In the countries belonging to the Human Sovereignty Alliance, they are not releasing any official reports. We do not know exactly how many of their citizens have died, or if the dropped scarabs have all been defeated." The documentary narrator took over from the expert and shared a cold, cruel opinion. Some experts even argue this. It is not that they are choosing not to make announcements, but rather the government itself, which would report the results, might have completely disappeared from those countries, leaving a terrible, breathtaking silence. The camera showed old helmets and traces of destruction left on an empty, snow-covered plain for a long, lonely time. Then, the screen faded to complete black. Ryu was watching TV in her room, curled up in front of a small folding table. It was already a clear spring, but for comfort, she was still wearing thick, gray sweatpants from winter. Resting her chin on her knees above those stretched pants, Sia's face looked pale, lit up by the blue light from the display. But the truth was, the TV broadcast was making her whole body shake with extreme anxiety. Tap, tap, tap. Sia's right leg shook so hard she could not control it, tapping against the floor. She was biting her lips so hard it was almost bleeding, and she was chewing nervously on her thumbnail. In her eyes, instead of the documentary, the terrible reality of her workplace, Sungwoon Electronics flashed by. Sungwoon Electronics was a world-leading memory chip maker. It used to sweep in massive amounts of cash with the chips made in its main Pyeongtaek factory. However, on February 19th, the black needles carrying 3 scarabs poured down and completely wiped out that huge high-tech factory, turning it into ashes and silicon dust. When the golden goose built with cutting-edge technology disappeared overnight, Sungwoon Electronics' profits and stock prices crashed. On the company message boards, a bloodbath of forced layoffs was happening every day. With unfocused eyes, Sia turned on her smartphone screen and muttered in a cracked voice, "We're ruined, really. We're all gonna be ruined." It hasn't even been 2 months since the Pyeongtaek line was blown away, and they're already combining departments and forcing people to quit. Her shaking fingers opened the calculator app on her phone and began typing meaningless numbers fiercely. A spreadsheet running separately in her head calculated her cruel financial situation. It's not even a buyout with a bonus. They're just forcing us out with zero extra pay. I saw a rumor a few days ago. The compensation money just for the workers who died when the Pyeongtaek factory blew up is in the billions of dollars. That alone means the company's cash flow is completely dried up. At this rate, smack! She threw her smartphone onto the folding table in frustration. She grabbed her messy hair with both hands, struggling with the fear that was choking her. At this rate, my hard-earned severance pay for next month will be frozen, won't it? I survived 3 years dealing with all my boss's garbage. If my severance pay is gone, what about the lease deposit for my mom and dad's diner? How am I supposed to pay the loan interest? The giant corporate shield she had trusted and devoted herself to for years was tearing away like paper. The terrible thought that she and her family might be thrown out onto the cold streets ate away at her mind. She pulled her legs to her chest, hugging them tightly, and stared at the empty air with red, bloodshot eyes that looked ready to burst into tears. The gray aftermath left by the massive disaster was squeezing the small back room of the diner in Sihongdong this Sunday morning, with total despair and choking anxiety. Sia's thoughts, starting from the collapse of Sungwoon Electronics, now spread to the massive disaster of a global financial collapse, pushing her to the limit. Stocks. Come to think of it, the world's stock markets were all blown away. I heard they reopened trading with useless paper, but people are only trying to sell. Then what about the banks? The country is a mess. Can the banks protect my money? What if they close their doors tomorrow? My hard-earned savings. I have to pull it all out no matter what. She jumped up from her spot and paced around the narrow room like a wild animal. But even the thought of taking out her savings and holding it as cash was quickly eaten by fear. No, cash is dangerous too. The whole world is a ruin. So what use are dollar bills? Didn't I see the price of spinach and pork jumping up at our store right now? The cost of food is going through the roof. Paper money will soon become worthless toilet paper, only good for starting fires. Her eyes turned to her company ID card, which she had thrown on the floor. The only thing that isn't going up is my salary. Actually, I don't even know when that salary will be cut off. Still, they said they would give me my severance pay, so I handed in my resignation letter a month ago. Once I finish training my replacement, I'm done too. Then what will my family eat to survive? How do I protect my savings and my severance pay? Sia tried to squeeze out all the financial knowledge she had learned during her MBA days at K University's business school. But lately, she had only been rolling around on the field managing production lines, so her financial knowledge was long forgotten. The only knowledge she could force out didn't go far beyond putting money into safe savings accounts. Out of habit, she turned on her smartphone to search the internet, but the internet infrastructure was destroyed, so she couldn't even search properly. I'm seriously going crazy from the frustration. The internet needs to work so I can look something up. Come to think of it, those ads for that satellite internet, Blue Halo or whatever, play all day long. But 1 month's bill for that is the size of my whole paycheck. Are poor people not even allowed to get information? I don't know. As her stress passed the breaking point, her brain couldn't handle the overload and tried to force a shutdown. She fell flat on her back onto the floor. Through the window, warm and cozy spring sunlight scattered over her eyelids and settled heavily. It was a lazy, peaceful warmth, so far removed from the end of the world. Even in her extreme anxiety, her tired eyes were slowly trying to close. The sunlight was shining on her closed eyes. Even with her eyes closed, the strong light of spring pierced through her eyelids and stopped her from falling completely asleep. Sia snapped her closing eyes wide open and, as if under a spell, stared at the window where the light was coming in. Something shiny. The warm sun, the light that never changes. At that moment, the most basic and essential financial knowledge sleeping in a corner of her MBA brain flashed through her mind like lightning. Gold? Right, it's gold! Sia jumped up, her pupils expanding fiercely. A strangely bright and confident smile spread across her lips, which had been trembling with fear just a moment ago. Since human history began, even when nations collapsed and civilizations burned, its value had never once changed. She had rediscovered the ultimate safe asset. Even if paper money becomes trash, gold is forever. It's the ultimate symbol of unchanging value in human history. I need to break my savings account right now and change it to gold, no matter what. Today, I'm going to sweep all the jewelry stores in Jongno. Her anxiety had suddenly transformed into a crazy drive for survival toward a clear goal. In a broken world, Sia's natural survival circuit had found the perfect breakthrough and started spinning powerfully. Having realized the great truth of survival, that gold was the only way to live, Saya moved without hesitation. She hurriedly put on the dark gray windbreaker she had thrown on the floor. She shoved her feet into the dirty grayish-white sneakers she had left past the doorway of the back room. She was in such a rush that she didn't even think to fix the folded heels. She just stepped on them like slippers and was about to head out the front door. Buzz, buzz. The smartphone she had thrown on the floor earlier started vibrating loudly. Ever since the black rain of scarabs fell on February 19th and destroyed the world's communication networks, smartphones had essentially become useless metal, no better than alarm clocks. But recently, as repair work progressed, they had barely returned to a very unstable level where 3G phone calls were possible, like tools from the past. Sia reached into the room, grabbed her smartphone, and checked the screen. The caller ID on the screen read, Soo-in Han. Sia swiped the screen urgently and spoke in a breathless voice. Soo-in, what's up on a weekend? Because the signal was bad, there was slight static noise over the receiver. Through that dry, mechanical sound came Soo-in's calm voice, with her emotions perfectly flat as always. I just got the chills for some reason. I called because I had a bad feeling something wrong was going to happen. A bad feeling. It was a strange thing to hear from Soo-in, a strict engineering student who usually didn't even care about superstitions or premonitions. But Sia firmly believed that her friend of the same age had somehow felt from far away that she had been rolling on the floor in extreme anxiety just moments ago. Sia combined that belief with her recent realization and exploded with joy. Wow, Soo-in, your instincts are sharp as always. Actually, I'm on my way to break my savings account right now, and I'm going to use that money to sweep the Jongno jewelry stores. Paper money is all going to become worthless scraps. We have to buy gold, no matter what. My foresight is crazy, right? As if she had seen right through the global economy, Saya's voice was highly excited. In her mind, she was already hugging a pile of gold bars, smiling as she imagined her perfect future surviving the hell of inflation. Silence flowed over the receiver for a moment. It wasn't because of a network delay or an error. It was because Soo-in's brain was instantly fact-checking her friend's grand plan against the current physical conditions. Soon, Soo-in's dry, emotionless words flew over and poured cold water on Sia's excited fantasy. Today is Sunday, so I don't think you can take your money out of the bank? The air in the diner's back room froze in an instant. Sia, who had been proud of gaining the great insight of capitalism to prepare for the end of the world, froze blankly, like someone who had been hit in the back of the head with a hammer. Sunday. That word hit her eardrums. No matter how great a financial truth she had realized, in the face of the reality of a red day on the calendar when the bank shutters were tightly closed, it was nothing more than the fantasy of a jobless fool who couldn't do anything. Standing awkwardly with the heels of her sneakers folded down, Sia slowly lowered the smartphone in her hand and stared into the air with a face mixed with emptiness and embarrassment. Her giant, crazy drive for survival, burning to sweep the jewelry stores, was defeated so pointlessly and miserably in front of the basic concept of days of the week on a calendar. Sia stared blankly into the air, then suddenly felt a strange feeling. Come to think of it, ever since they first became friends, it was always Sia's job to barge in one-sidedly and make noise in Soo-in's world, as Soo-in was always quiet and locked in her own space. A friend of the same age who hated touching other people had called her first, just because of an unknown premonition that gave her the chills. It was something completely unimaginable for the usual Soo-in. Something serious must have really happened. Sia properly fixed the folded heels of her shoes and spoke in a worried voice. Did something happen, by the way? Where are you right now? I'll come over. Over the receiver. Soo-in's usual dry voice returned, as if her emotions were completely erased. The lab. If you're coming, I haven't eaten yet, so let's meet at the dining hall later. Sia confirmed that Soo-in's attitude wasn't any different from usual. Only then did she feel relieved. Pulling up her unique energy, she said, Got it. I'm leaving right now. Sia hung up the phone and yelled loudly toward the kitchen past the sliding door. Mom, I'm gonna go see Soo-in. Without even waiting for an answer, Sia ran out of the diner. In front of the shop, her dad's old delivery bike was parked. With practiced hands, she unlocked it and hopped onto the seat. The calculator in her head instantly estimated the distance. From here to the K University student dining hall, if she pedaled until her thighs felt like bursting, it would take exactly 40 minutes. It was the exact time she could arrive while Soo-in was eating. Squeak, squeak. With the metallic sound of the chain grinding against the gears, Sia cut through the clear, dry spring wind and headed out onto the road. In contrast to the warm holiday sunlight at its peak, the scenery of the road she was pedaling down was frighteningly quiet and empty. The lanes, which normally would be totally jammed with family cars going out for a Sunday drive, had not a single moving personal car. Only cargo trucks or city buses, spitting out black smoke here and there, proved that this road was still somewhat working. Riding alone on the empty asphalt, Sia thought about the hopeless news reports that had covered the media over the past few days. When the black rain created by the falling scarabs came down on February 19th, its destructive path ruthlessly crushed oil drilling and refining facilities in major oil-producing countries around the world, including the refineries in Houston, Texas. As the global oil supply chain heavily collapsed, international gas prices shot up crazily, more than doubling just in the last few days. The shortage was expected to get even worse. Now, filling a gas-powered personal car and driving it on the road had become a luxurious form of transportation that only people with money to burn could afford. Meanwhile, electric cars couldn't become the new alternative to gas cars either. Because gas prices went up, electricity prices went up just as much. Speeding down the empty lane, Sia let out a rough breath but gave an ironic smile. Phew, ha. It sure is nice to ride a bike since there are no cars. Sia rode down the road of a gray world created by a global disaster, a strangely quiet place where all engines and motors were stopping. Leaving the tightly closed banks and jewelry stores behind, she pedaled and pedaled to meet Suine, her only strong safety net that never changed.